Welcome to our 12th Salon of the Maternal Gift Economy Breaking Through series hosted by Genevieve Vaughan, who's with us today in the International Feminists for the Gift Economy. I'm Letitia Layson, your moderator. We're delighted to have Pilwha Chang calling in from South Korea and Tracy Gary from San Francisco with us today. Our format is going to be slightly different. I'll introduce both guests. They'll have engaged in a short dialogue after they present their talks, and then we'll open up to questions and answers. And Genevieve will be with us also to engage and if you have questions for her. Okay, Tracy's going to be our first speaker. Tracy is a catalyst for generosity, economic, racial, and gender justice, and a global citizen seeking caring partners for a better world. She is a nonprofit entrepreneur who, with others, sparked the women's funding movement, now over 190 women's funds and hundreds of women's giving circles worldwide, and with a social justice, gender justice, or community-based philanthropy framework in many others. She has started 24 nonprofits, including her latest, Earth Legacy Alliance, always co-created with a team. She lives outside of San Francisco and specializes in growing and supporting women donors, staff, and family leadership. She's the author of Inspired Philanthropy, Creating a Giving Plan and Leaving a Legacy, in its third edition. Matriarchal wisdom and traditions are present in all her work, and the gift economy is simply, with feminist perseverance and activism, our shared framework and belief of how to achieve the world we want. Welcome, Tracy.
I'm delighted to be with you all, and I've really so admired the persistence of the team that Jen and others have put together over decades now, reminding us that we are in a long lineage of matriarchs and caring citizens worldwide who want a better world and who have experimented and done various things over millennium. And we are now called as never before to save our planet and ourselves through stopping self-centered thinking and creating caring communities. So my comments today will be really the result of my own journey. Just very briefly, I grew up in a very wealthy family and in the 50s and 60s, and was raised by African-American Hispanic caregivers, lived in two different worlds. So I made a decision, having seen Martin Luther King when I was 9 and believing that I had a dream of solidarity, and I did not have that language, of course, that was very similar to his dream of our being side by side. And while I had no context for matriarchy, in fact, no mothering at all, really, as a child, I sought it out. What did a caring and nurturing family and community and world, what would that look like? So my pursuit of actually being a person who both gave away, redistributed my wealth and power, and my decision to actually influence others to do so, because if someone had told me that actually giving away a fortune would give me the greatest gift of all, which is a sense of belonging and a sense of community, I would have done it even sooner than age 35. So I'm delighted to be with you on the year of my 70th birthday, and am growing in my deep hope and belief that unless we can create a caring culture and bring forward really the beautiful benefits of the gift economy and learn from what matriarchal cultures have taught us, then we are doomed. And my comments today are less academic than as an activist. I wake up every day, Pilwha and I agree about this. I wake up every day as an activist, determined to actually do my part. There's not a day in my life that I'm ever without both fulfillment and purpose. And that has been true for over 50 years. And there is always wonderful work to be done, always in community. And Jen is a wonderful reminder, and has been for me, as of each of you, many of you that I've seen in Las Vegas and in Italy and a number of places where we've convened together to speak about what is the way forward and what can we learn from the past. So I'd like to give you a brief overview of some of the women's funding movement. I have used growing women's foundations and social justice foundations as my way of actually beginning to do donor education. Some of these will be a little harder to read, but I will tell you that I will spend just 5 or 10 minutes on this, and you will get the slides and the PowerPoints, I'm assuming, as follow-up, as they're always so wonderful to do. So there are over 190 women's foundations and social justice foundations. All of these began in the 1970s. There were in the US, and I'm sure globally also, scholarships that have been offered to women and girls for hundreds of years through the American Association of University Women, and I'm sure through governments who've offered free education to women. But briefly, some of the highlights of the women's funds are, from my perspective, and everyone has a different view. We call the movement of all these women's foundations, some of which really imbue the matriarchal and feminist values, and some of which do not. Because of course America is and the world is a very diverse place, and there's lots of political and other controversies that sometimes make a full caring agenda not possible in some cities, towns, or countries. So I will, if we go back to the slide again, Diane, I'll just read a few things from this as highlights to give you a sense of history. And then I will give you a sense of some of the really amazing work that's being done now and some conclusions. So the Ms. Foundation was started in 1972. Some of you know that there were some records at that time, a word we hardly use, but some books and records that Gloria Steinem, Marlo Thomas, and Letty Cotton Pogren created that created income. And they put that, what ended up being about 100,000 US, into a foundation called the Ms. Foundation for Women. Now was founded in 1966, but was not actually a foundation. The Feminist Majority Foundation came in 86. Estrella, which is a foundation that has initially was funding all projects that actually help low-income women, was giving away, under $100,000 in 1977 through 1980, early 1980s, and was quite quiet about it. They were a group of lesbians who cared very deeply about the state of the world and funded initially in the United States. The Women's Foundation of California came along. I was involved as we had started a women's building a couple of years before, and we realized how incredibly hard it was to raise money for women and girls. And we looked at a Ford Foundation report, and that Ford Foundation report said that less than 1% of all foundation dollars in the United States in 1979 were going to projects that helped women and girls. And we felt, as we were 50% at that point, growing 51% of the population, that this was simply an unacceptable reality. And I, for one, realized that very few women understood their money, had money, or were really felt fluency or agency to use or ask for money. And so we decided to do some financial education along the way and to work with low-income women, middle-income women, and also with wealthy women to say, you need to learn about money, money management, and philanthropy, and also fundraising. And then you will feel tooled to be able to be a person who could change your investments to be in alignment. You could become a policymaker and ask people to change laws. And so this is a set of tools that we must put in our toolkit. Going back, Diane, to the slide again. So the Women's Foundation of San Francisco, which was called the Women's Foundation, we decided that we would raise $300,000 in 1979, and we had zero at the time that we started, only the promise of a building that another person a woman was going to leave us, which came in about 10 years later. And we raised $100,000 for the endowment, $100,000 to operate, and $100,000 for grants between 79 and 80. That same foundation now is a statewide foundation. I'm still involved, and it's raising $10 million today per year and has $6 million in its endowment. We actually sparked also and had as one of our 6 goals to create a network of women's funds worldwide. And so we set about in 1985 to having the first women's funding network. But Mama Cash Foundation had been founded in 1983 by Marian Sachs and others who wanted to lend money to people in the community, to grassroots organizations. And so in our first gathering, which was in 1985, we decided that we would invite not just US-based foundations that were starting or had started, such as the ones above, but also ones that were in formation or were trying to figure out what they should do as priorities. And you can see through this. So it was a very, very interesting first gathering in which some people said, we're simply not going to be funding reproductive rights, or we're simply not funding lesbians, or we're simply not doing this and that. And we were saying, let's look at what we share in common. Let's look at the values, and if we are community-based, that it's not for us as a group of privileged founders or activists to say what we will or won't be funding. What if we listen very deeply and I began to come up with a formation, which was that really what we were about was community-based philanthropy. This was not a bunch of individual donors deciding where their money should go. Community-based philanthropy, later in an organization called Changemakers, which I helped to put together, we discovered that the values, not unlike the gift economy, were donors and activists and community leaders identifying problems in our communities and working together to solve them. Donors and activists and community leaders identifying problems in our communities and then solving them together. So what followed, and I won't belabor this further, but if we scroll down, the Global Fund for Women is now, as you know, has given away over $100 million in 170 countries, started in 87, and it's funded over 4,000 projects worldwide. And they also fiscally sponsor about 8 women's funds. And so the emergence of more women's funds happened in part because of the catalyst of the Global Fund for Women in 1987, and also the really strong existence and what I will say is panache, really, the beautiful panache, a word you may not be familiar with, but a kind of boldness of Mama Cash saying, we must fund, and we must fund not just in Amsterdam where we are, but worldwide, that we must care about the South. And their true reach and their determination to not just be self-centered and funding only their own country was an inspiration to many of us. So we actually went to a group of activists and said, we'd like you to start the Global Fund for Women. And so they did. Urgent Action Fund followed in 1997, a full 10 years later. Women's Philanthropy Institute, I'm really not, of course, with 190, I'm only giving an essence. Women's Philanthropy Institute was a group of academics who, for the most part, were involved in women's philanthropy at universities during alumni days when alumni would come back, and they decided to start having some programs for women and also get some research funded about women's giving. And they have been a tremendous force in producing, through Indiana University at the Lilly Institute, all kinds of documents and research, as well as workshops for women donors on how do you become a better giver. And of course, the Women Donors Network and a number of other things that we started, Women Moving Millions has our learning communities where women donors have had a chance to also become better at listening and at really learning how to respond, not just to come from their own interests and their own arrogance. So Women's Philanthropy Institute is a, we saw initially is not really very feminist, as a, an organization that was mostly academics, and we had a little bit of as activists, a little attitude. I got involved with all of them and just decided it was really a place for me to learn. And particularly people like Sandra Shar-Hardy was very advanced in seeing that women's giving circles, and she now has a global women's giving circle, as you'll see at the end here, that there's an international group of women who are giving at lower levels, oftentimes $1,500, it might be $1,000, might be $500 internationally, each of them, and that the worldwide we were seeing the proliferation of women really wanting to give. Prospera was the international network of women's funds. There are over 40 members in 37 countries now. They've made grants in 170 countries. They were founded in 2000 with 9 member funds. Really, they were called the International Network of Women's Funds initially, and really sparked through European and US based women's funds that were funding internationally, like some of the ones that are here. But they also did this wonderful thing, which was to really reform themselves in 2000 into Prospera to attract other funds and to focus really on the global South and Latin America and South America and Africa, and they have done a wonderful job of actually attracting new funds. Women Moving Millions was really quite amazing launch in 2007. Helen and Swanee Hunt and Chris Grum from the Women's Funding Network at that point thought we need to get larger gifts for women's funds. And now over, I think it's closer to 450 women and some men have made $1 million gifts to either women's funds or women's nonprofits worldwide. And you can feel free to ask me questions. And then Women's Giving Circles International was founded in 2017. So things continue to grow and to emerge. And what I can say is what's exciting for me is the creativity, the remarkable creativity that exists. And when we would come together, and this is really the matriarchal culture of sharing, and we would have, the Women's Funding Network would bring people together as Prospera does now online, and when they can, of course, together. And what we saw was there was such a spirit of sharing. It's like ridiculous. Why don't we'll all bring our annual reports, we'll all bring our marketing materials, we'll bring our giving plans, we'll bring strategies we've used with donors. And it was very much, and even agendas. What does a good board agenda look like? What does a good staff meeting agenda look like? How do we hire? What are job descriptions? There was a complete open source sharing. That no one was proprietary. It didn't just have to do with the fact that we were geographically different. It had to do with the spirit between us that understood that we would accelerate and advance the movement of change if we would be generous in our sharing. And so it was. And the Women's Funding Network became a hub that was a place of sharing and caring and really trying to be responsive. There's always an unevenness of how well you do at that, because, the growth from 12 funds to 50 funds to, my goal was to have 100 funds by the year 2000. And in fact, we had 125 and it keeps growing. And I have not been a person who's been helping those women's funds grow really since my own goal was achieved in the year 2000, but there's a ton of wonderful people who are still seeding and looking at these different models. Women's foundations and women's funds, and how do we do fundraising? You're going to hear shortly some of the uphill battles of fundraising and how complex it is, how still we're making the case to foundations and others, which we should not have to make. We know the UN has said that an investment in women is the way that we will turn around the world. Well, certainly in the United States and elsewhere, giving to women and girls, including the existence of all these women's funds, over 100 in the United States itself, still giving to women and girls is way below 5%. And we, even after 40 years of being at this very diligently, we have huge numbers of issues that are not being met worldwide. So I wanted just to spend a few minutes, and I know that my time is limited, so I want to, I know that I have, 5 or 8 minutes. Just looking very quickly, Diane, at the slides of one of the examples of a women's fund that I've been involved with for over 40 years, to see the emergence. Imagine a little foundation that had exactly no money and no idea how to go about grant making, or, none of us had ever raised any money. And the issue of how many of them are feminist and really understand what feminist values are. So if you quickly go through these slides, there are 5 or 6 slides, you get a picture today of the enormity of the analysis. There's sort of relief and resilience funding. There's anchoring our grantees. There's thinking about cultural change and what that means. I won't read this whole slide, but I urge you to come back to it to understand that one entity, now a $10 million budget, which began as really $100,000 in its operating budget 42 years ago, has become this force for change because it is centered in the needs of the community and has extraordinary practices. Serena Khan, who's the head of the foundation, when COVID happened, decided that all the staff should be sent home. There should be a 4-day work week because of the added pressures. And it's become an exemplary organization functioning with feminist values and matriarchal considerations, and single mother considerations for staff and board and for our grantees during the COVID as well. So there's, this is a very rich slide, which I will come back to if you want to during questions. But, there's both a policy initiative that has trained over 500 women activists and 100 donors to learn about policy and engage in policy changes in the state of California, which has become a model worldwide, and a well-being index to sort of really hold accountable others, as well as donor organizing and philanthropic advising, and a newer program that we have, which is also free, called Free Will, that is really our democratization of legacy planning, which enables all women of any income to do their end of life planning free of charge through a link that we provide. It's very rich, exciting. Young women and young entrepreneurial women are involved. So quickly through the other slides, and then I know I only have a few minutes. So in their strategic planning framework, of course, keep going, you'll see sort of the goal setting and the multiple ways and streams of income, and basically we ask donors to give to our general fund, but in some cases foundations are very tied to wanting to fund a specific thing because they're very outcome oriented and impact oriented. But we have managed over 40 years to understand that it's our job to lead and to say this is what's needed. And I've never been on the board. I've never been a paid staff member. I've only been a donor and a cheerleader for the success of the foundation, and working, of course, also on their legacy work because that builds the future. So continuing.
5 minutes, Tracy.
No problem. Thank you so much. They train people. They, keep going, Diane. There's all kinds of work that is done. They really unite the movement leaders and funders, policy activists, and influencers, and are phenomenal in their diversity and their caregiving and caretaking. They have yoga and meditation classes and stress management classes for their grantees. So this is part of a caring. I'll never forget the time I went to Pilwha, the Women's Fund in Nepal, and for the first 5 days we were there, for 3 days we got massages, having come in from all over the world. So this is a part of growing a caring institution too. So next slide. So building a feminist future, it's really about trust, and it's a trust-based dynamic. And keep going. And there are, this is too long, but we'll make sure you get it, which is these are opportunity funds where people can, corporations as well as others, can actually contribute to the strength and the building over the next few years of how the Women's Foundation will grow from a $10 million entity to one that is raising $25 million a year. And we are very excited to be on that agenda. And finally, we have a slide that is a conclusion of my comments that is a little dense, but forgive me for, Diane is going to help me get it up there. It involves going back and forth from Google to a slide. My conclusions are this. There is a great deal of overlap between what happens, and forgive this for being so small. The Women's Foundation's women's giving and community-based giving is centered on the actual needs of others, not our made up needs of others. It's really a transformative solution, just as the gift economy is and has been. What are the steps? We listen deeply to the needs and ideas of those in needs. We engage with and are in community with them and are accountable to others, whatever our class and race. We try to put aside our arrogance and put on our curiosity and our sincere interest. We put our own assumptions and isolation and excesses aside, ideally in the trash, but we redistribute them carefully. We collaborate and give time, talent, treasure, or creativity to find solutions that are or can be life-changing. And we advocate actively for systemic change and safety nets that protect more people or we redistribute our wealth through taxation and distribute power by diverse democratic representation. We engage others to make systemic change and to become advocates for others. We reject the premise that more wealth and money makes for a better life. We seek out our alignment for our values, lifestyles, and more modestly, live more modestly so that others may lead a different life. And we consider our own excess and how to really, how does it hurt others and the planet in making changes, and how we can consider others more deeply. We give as we are inspired to give, to authentically show our caring. Do people in the West care about others? Do white people care about others? Do others who dominate cultures, gender-based or varied cultures or political perspectives, care to respect others who are different, or are they only there for themselves? Forgive me, but I'm going to need another minute. I hope that's all right. Without this caring, we are doomed. With an opening of caring across race, class, gender, and culture, there is hope. Black Lives Matter and our planet's climate crisis, and certainly the lessons of COVID, I will add, make us morally bankrupt. And our illness trajectory insists on our awakening. And I see that this project is really about our awakening and documenting the awakening that happened in the past and now. So the surges, especially in the West and the US, of inequality are unparalleled and sickening rates during the COVID. 664 US billionaires alone have more wealth than the bottom 45% of the population, and worldwide more than 90%. They gained together $1.9 trillion to have $4.2 trillion in assets during the COVID. So taxation is one way to stop them. But we also have to offer consciousness and one question from the gift economy. What do you need? All. How can we collectively increase our caring capacity worldwide through redistribution of wealth and resourcefulness? And can we build community with you, and you see it in your own self-interest, to change power, and to really think through this. I want you to look up, if you haven't, Mackenzie Scott, who is Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon's ex-wife, and her first $8 billion in grants after her divorce in the past 8 months, and her practices. There's lots of data on it, and it is a beautiful example of one woman making a decision to be community-based and to give through the community. There is a better way to build a world and the gift economy and the women's funding movement with fair taxation, safety net policies, and consciousness shifting to connecting through caring community for all is that path. I honor you and all that you are doing, and I am with you on the journey forever.
Thank you so much, Tracy. That was fabulous. I want to remind everyone that you didn't need to take copious notes, that we will have Tracy's PowerPoint available for you for a download at the website as soon as we get the video up. So thank you again, Tracy. Our next speaker I'd like to introduce, Pilwha Chang, Professor Emeritus of Ewha Women's University, first full professor in women's studies in Korea and Asia. She served as founding chair of APEC, Ad Hoc Advisory Group on Gender Integration, as the director of Asian Center for Women's Studies, launched the Ewha Global Empowerment Program for women activists of nonprofit organizations from Asia and African countries. She also served as the director of Ewha Leadership Development Institute, where she conducted programs for women leaders of various fields, including business corporations. She served as chair of Asian Women's Bridge, Doran, providing skills and leadership training centers in Nepal, Cambodia, Laos, and Indonesia. She works closely with the Ministry of Gender Equality the Korean Women's Development Institute, and KOIA, as well as many NGOs, including the Korean Sexual Violence Relief Center. Currently, she is working as chair of the Korean Foundation of Women. Welcome, Pilwha, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know it's 1 a.m. or so in Korea, so thank you for staying awake.
Thank you, Letitia, and thank you for inviting me for such a good gathering of people. Am I loud enough?
Yes, you're good.
Right. So thank you and hello to everybody. And thank you, Tracy, for having been so thorough in the history of Women's Foundation in the US as well as globally. And I am not from a wealthy family, and I haven't been in a foundation fundraising business. And I'm a very newcomer. So what I'm going to talk about is first the Korea Foundation for Women, which is 20 years old now. But I have been working there only for 1 year, and I'm still adjusting and getting to know the very different environment from what I was working in the university. I will first give a very short description of South Korea, which you may not know very well, and then talk about very brief description of the activities of Korea Foundation for Women. And then, as I put in the daring title, this is too ambitious actually, how to do a gift economy in fundraising. This is not because I know how to do, but because I want to solicit your suggestions and share problems together and find direction for the future activities. Right. So South Korea has changed from one of the poorest countries in the world to a large trading country, ranking 10th to 12th in the world. This rapid change, along with very competitive market forces and technological innovations, has created a very deepened gaps in class, gender, generation, worldviews, lifestyles, etc. During this very rapid social change, people feel the pressure and the stress to survive in the increasingly dehumanizing environment where Korean society now is. And the statistics show that Korea shows the world lowest birth rate, which shows in statistical terms that how people feel insecure or pressured. One member household takes up 30% of total households. People are living by oneself without living with other family members. And more than half of young generation think it is okay not to have children. And that is related to the lowest birth rate in the world. In this social environment, actually introducing maternal thinking and question of mother to younger generation is a very challenging task. Korea Foundation for Women was established in 1999. We celebrated our 20th birth 2 years ago. and it was established when the Korea was going under the IMF stewardship because of the economic crisis, the foreign currency crisis, and also on the other hand, Korea was included in the OECD countries, so that all foreign aids, which used to give some, support to women's organizations, had to be cut because the regulations didn't really allow OECD countries to receive aid money. So it was timely that the women's leaders at that time got together to establish Korea Foundation for Women at that time. The leaders came from all different political background and generations, and so KFW became Korea's first independent non-profit foundation for women. So we can say that Korea Foundation for Women is an outcome of the women's movement, and KFW has supported activities of women's organizations with a very firm belief that a society that gives hope to our daughters will lead to a promising future for both genders. Main projects areas in 2019 can be categorized in 5 areas. Sorry, expanding culture of giving and sharing. Korea, starting as a very poor country, recovering from the colonial past under the Japanese rule, and seriously damaged by the Korean War, started as a very poor country, and people didn't really have much money. So culture of giving was not really established. So one of the main objectives of the foundation was to encourage the culture of giving and sharing. And also the main focus is that changing institutional and cultural discriminations against women and assuring women's human rights, advancing women's empowerment, and respecting diversity and caring society. In the year 2019, the total of fund raised is in US dollar terms, $2.25 million. So in Korea Foundation for Women is placed in kind of a mid-size foundation among welfare or foundations for various purposes. More than 95% of the such foundations are much smaller in monetary terms. So actually Korean Foundation for Women is better than the very smallest ones. Yep. Next slide, please. Yes, these are the breakdowns of different categories of the activities. Next slide, please. Under the title of Expanding Culture of Giving and Sharing, we had a yearly campaign for 100-person relay donations and SOS campaign, and Kosari Son campaign is the very small amount raised from grandchildren and young people to share their little pocket money to people and children of other countries. And company, business, enterprises and customer joint fund. And there are sharing of cultural events, like those theatrical companies would share their tickets for our donors, etc. And 1% giving campaign is for the authors or for National Assembly representatives who share 1% of their salary. And the numbers have dwindled over time, but it started as a good idea. Right. Under the category of changing institutional and cultural discrimination against women's issues is grants for gender equality and grants on demand, and at Uri Bank giving money to put safety light for women. I mean, these are quite a small project, but it stood out as one exceptional case. Next, please. Hope for Mothers is women's health support project, and Hope Bank is diaper support project for single mothers raising children, and Homebit Scholarship grant is an individual's project to help offer scholarship for ex-prostitutes. Cheer Up Daughters, it's distribution of sanitary pads project, which started because of the very poor girls didn't really have money to buy sanitary pads. So that became a social issue at that time. So that really made us to organize, to solicit help from the company which produces sanitary pads. Next, please. And women's empowerment projects include space improvement and upgrading. This is provided by Korea Pacific Cosmetic Company, which provide fund to improve the work spaces, offices of women's organizations. And Yuhan Kimberly offers NGO activists scholarship for MA in Women's Studies, as well as a shorter course for leadership development for NGO workers, activists who have been in that position over 3 years. This short trip, Deep Breath, is for women activists, those for their reflections and some holidays offered by some insurance companies. And this is one of the most popular program, because they can take a week or 2 weeks off and spend time in some foreign countries as well. But that had to be cut down because of the COVID-19. Next, please. Mama Project is supporting single mothers, family, and again, IKEA Korea is providing children's room, a child's room of a single mother, which gives them a great boost in their life. With Mom, that's also supporting childcare of single mothers. And this project, My Future, My Business, is provided by JP Morgan in supporting business consultancy for immigrant women who want to start their businesses. Right. There are several other projects for incoming immigrant women. Next, please. Next, please. Networking foundations, as Tracy said, explained, Prospera, International Network of Women's Fund, has been in our network, and last year we received a grant for helping improving the office, rather than providing for other partners. This was greatly welcome, because in order to change the projects and programs because of the limitations of COVID-19, that the staff members were all very exhausted. And so that was a very welcome breath for our usually very tight management expenses. MIRE Forum was established in order to get help from a community of well-meaning business companies, and somehow the first founder had a very good connections with the business community, but that somehow the membership was dwindling. So this, the future of this forum is a little bit worrying. Right. So the challenges, the challenges are many-folded, that like social and environmental dimension, and then there's backlash against women and girls, so that instead of that there is a backlash from young males, 20s, maybe 30s. That there was a misogynist ideas and really holding us back in becoming very active in the campaigns. And cyber violence is also kind of shrinking the scope of activities, and very much of a neoliberal, individualistic attitudes, and coupled with increasing one-person households, diminishing communal living, as well as a young age group in their 20s and 30s face the threat of unemployment, economic insecurity, and these all affect the prospect of spreading sort of campaign and fundraising activities. So I want to, I have become not only I've become to think of the future of this foundation. We certainly have two tracks. One is to solicit people with money, but another is to be much more active in having a mass campaign to get
5 minutes, Pilwha.
Yes, succeed in the mobilization of people willing to give money for the cause of women's movement. And so in both ways, we need to persuade the reasons to give. So I want to share with you and would like to get your suggestions of how to introduce, how to use gift economy, how to kind of spread the ideas of gift economy to our activities of fundraising. So shall we go back to the first slide of how to do gift economy? I am indebted to Jen's ideas from the beginning of her book of Forgiving in 1997, wasn't it? And we need to identify and recognize gift giving as the starting point, and gifts of tradition, culture, nature, care, love. All these are essential for our sustainability, without which we cannot sustain our lives at all any longer. But we are so imbued in idea of exchange, we just lose sight of that, and that gifts are taken as given, So it is interesting to point out that the two logics. So the next slide, please. the logic of exchange is how we are brainwashed about. That is highly valued and pervasive in daily lives. And this logic of exchange artificially creates scarcity. And that scarcity is a result of wealth being channeled to the few from the many. And then scarcity discredits gift giving. And so the logic of the unilateral gift is unrecognized, discredited, and despised. All of you here know all this already, but I reiterate it to share our thinking together, and then I hope you add to that list to make suggestions of how to do gift economy in fundraising and how relevant it may be to fundraising. Next, please. Contrast to logic would be useful, just to show that gift giving is direct unilateral satisfaction of needs, and therefore it is other oriented. Whereas in exchange logic, the reason for exchange is to get something, for giving to get something. So it's ego oriented. And while gift giving implies the value of the receiver, because we have to know what is the need of the other, exchange logic implies the value of the self, and therefore it uses the other as means. Being raised in a market society, this comes really very natural to us, that to do exchange, you have to have a profit, and we see others as a means of my profit maximization. In all, gift giving is mostly qualitative, whereas exchange is mostly quantitative. And gift giving gives attention to the other, because the needs of the other is the object of giving, whereas exchange is giving attention to the ego's needs. Next, please. So if we give more attention, if we concentrate on gift giving, if we revive the existence of gift giving as an important part of our life, and if we practice and remember gift economy, we can have restore mutual recognition and understanding and trust between giver and receiver. And that, when it's repeated, we can have positive expectations and relations by giving and giving again and passing the gift on. So I would be truly grateful how all these would be fed in the ideas of fundraising and how relevant they may be, and how, if we have some discussion point, how this is related to Tracy's idea of generosity. So yes, I will finish by inviting your suggestions or questions.
Thank you, Pilwha.
Well,
Very
I think we're
much.
gonna have a little exchange between us just for 5
Yes.
minutes, or 5 to 10 minutes, and then
Exactly.
we'll right? Is that right? So that was just beautiful, Pilwha. And I just want to say, I have a meditation class I'm in, and one of the things we've been talking about is how do you know when you're in a state of awe or joy or at home? And for me, the beauty of hearing you, knowing that we come from really different, on the one hand, apparently, different places, that you are much more of an academic, but we share our activism, and that our conclusions, although yours are stated so beautifully in analysis and mine are stated in perhaps, I hope, hope and experience, that we actually come to the same conclusion, and that is that really this is about learning to love ourselves and each other, and to care in a deeper way. And that is the beauty of the gift economy, as well as the healing of the planet. And so people, if there are, other conclusions, we can kind of see, I mean, it's a very beautiful thing to feel at home with your analysis and completely agree with everything that you've stated. And I think the main thing I have is like, what do you see as our learning to love, and what else we can do? And also the fundraising piece is very, very hard, because a lot of people are in scarcity, and they don't love themselves, and they don't know how to trust. We must do a kind of donor education along the way, and legacy education, and so that that we build trust, trust based. There is a quite beautiful new theory in the United States around foundations called trust-based philanthropy, and I'll send a link into you, because it is about cracking open the heart and being able to say, this controlling everything is really not working. We need to trust the people in the community, and the Global Fund for Women began to do that very early on. So anything else you want to share, Pilwha, about just what's holding us back from being more loving? What do you see as a barrier in your fundraising that we might brainstorm around?
Well, I mean, just to start off the last year, that it is the COVID, which really restricted the scope of activities that usually we would have a campaign or a big meeting, so that we can have some ceremonies and festivity to have the atmosphere of giving, and to encourage each other to sort of have to share the need and what we can do together. But because of that shrinking space, and the kind of shrinking mind, can we say that, that we were very much discouraged to actively go out and so on. I wonder whether this is an excuse, but certainly there was an element to that. Another stumbling block is certainly that staff members, that the very low salary of our staff members really is serious problem because nowadays we are made to think that our worth is gauged by the money we can receive as a salary. And if we can pay a smaller amount of salary, their self-esteem seems to be going down. So, so this is one area that I would like to hear your idea or solution. And again, that that the kind of sense of mission to work in an organization like this, where my generation feel as an important core point, doesn't seem to be shared by younger generation. So that is another area, how to motivate people to have the pride or genuine recognition of the worth of the activity we are carrying out. That is, yeah, you know, against the background of backlash, misogyny. Yeah, right. I would say that's both internal institutional issue of the foundation, but also the social background.
So you raise a very good point, which is really what stands in the way sometimes. I'll never forget the head of the Ms. Foundation, Marie Wilson, years ago, used to say, "What's holding you back? Is it that you're afraid to say you love and value women in the face of a society that is so misogynist?" And of course, I think she's right, you know, that we sometimes hold ourselves back from being able, and some of that's also homophobia. Sometimes we just say, I just love these women, you know, it's, we make other people nervous by proclaiming our love and our value for women in our lives. You know, people will assume we're gay, or, you know, that we love women is not considered a good thing in some places. And it's actually the very thing that sustains us in many places. It's not about sexuality at all. In a very small percentage of cases, it may be, of course. But what's true is it's really about letting ourselves love to counterbalance this just hostility toward women, which is uncalled for. So I think in that way, what's holding us back may be the full expression of inviting people into that loving space to say, if you really love and care about women, then investing in women and girls becomes the mandatory counterbalance for the kind of behavior and treatment that we're having, and that it is unacceptable. In the same way, I think Black Lives Matter has taught us in their generations now to say this is not acceptable behavior, and we insist on and ask you to reconsider how you are expressing yourself to be more loving and caring. And a lot of people don't know how, so we have to teach them, and that's part of the donor and legacy education, or the activist education as well. Is there anything that, when you think about what else you might need, you know, that inspiration to allow, in the face of misogyny and being put down so much, you know, how can we serve and support you and your foundation?
Right. I mean,
Pilwha, could you just speak up also a little bit?
Yeah.
There you go.
Right. Certainly we need some skill training that we have relatively short period of growing as a fundraising organization. We do not have enough expertise in having the basic skills of campaigns or fundraising ideas. And that would be a very good help if available from predecessors, although that that environment, the social culture is different from US or Europe, many other countries. But there must be some commonalities or skills or expertise of professional fundraising given basics. So, donor and legacy education, and also providing trainings for partners, and very small, I mean, not very small, but very specific training like bookkeeping, that if we are doing very well. We've been noticed and praised by our transparency, but we can also help other small women's organizations to have the skills, training in running organizations and bookkeeping and fundraising and all that kind of sustainability issues. And also a very important issue, emerging issue, is how to manage staff members. And that also is very serious, that with growing, changing labor laws, and then the demand, the level of demand from the younger staff members is really going up day by day, and that the senior members do not realize that they have to keep up with this rise in the demand of on the part of junior members of the staff. So these are examples of very specific trainings and practical trainings we as the foundation need, but also that can benefit other organizations, partner organizations. We work together.
So I know we're going to open it up shortly, but I just think this is a beautiful example of how we can spark creativity. Some of you have wonderful ideas. And the one thing I want to really say is, the Black Lives Matter movement and the feminist movement over many, many years has been this creative tension between women telling the truth, or African-American, Hispanics, and others telling the truth of their experience. And there being, as was true in AIDS, sort of the set of people who used advocacy and a very harsh approach that said, we insist, we insist, we insist. And then a loving approach that said, here's the way. And I want us to remember that we have, without arrogance, the moral high ground. We have actually the way to build a better culture. And it's been in existence since matriarchy. Matriarchy may not be received as well as it should be, as a period when in fact it flourished and the civilization flourished. But we can step in and say, we have a way that people are recognized, and that includes our staff are overworked, and we need to allow them to take time off when they need it. We need to have fair practices and safety nets, even for our staff and for our boards, and so that we are growing healthy relationships and healthy organizations, because only then can we be healthy for our communities at large. And I think as we begin to understand that generosity begins with ourselves and taking care of ourselves, that we then are in a position to give that love to others. That sounds so simple, but it is in some ways, we then don't come with the same hostility, although there will be some people that need to be very emphatic in what is wrong with capitalism and what is wrong with the self-centered thinking, and invite people into a different space where they can feel the love and feel the caring and feel the belonging. So I think that's our exciting without, I want to say those of you who are speaking about the capitalistic patriarchy and the failures of it, are we too idealistic to say we can counterbalance? And the reality is we must stay in that idealism. It's not an idealism, it's a reality that we actually see the well-being and the health and the hope that comes from living and working in environments and cultures and foundations and institutions, and circles, just even how we run our meetings and how we start with a check-in and we do appreciations at the end and we have ceremony. There's just certain things that actually come from indigenous communities, and we bring those forward as the health and well-being for our society, and also the health and well-being for us in daily practice. So I make a deep bow for our people, an honor to do this with you, and I look forward to coming and visiting you and inviting you to do the same here. And we will continue to grow as a global movement that is infused with the values of the gift economy. So I think it's probably, if you're all right, should we open to questions from all? Or
Yes, I think we have about 30 minutes to do questions before I'll come back to the two of you and Jen to wrap it up and say our goodbyes. So Liliana, do you have a question for
I have a question for Tracy from Judith Mason. Tracy, who have been some of your role models? And what book are you currently reading? Many thanks for your wonderful presentation.
Very kind. Of course I loved Gloria Steinem. I just thought she was, so bold and so kind of amazing in her way early on. But there are other heroes along the way, so many that I can honestly say that, Anita Hill made me cry with her how she was treated was one thing, but how she maintained her dignity was really another. And of course, we live in a moment where there are so many heroines right now that are informing us of a way to live. Even oddly, I saw a film the other day on Jane Fonda, and I was just shocked at what an amazing heart and soul she has become. So these are not people that I would normally. I have most of my. I would say that Rita Tapa at the Nepal Women's Foundation is one of my just deepest heroines, because of the way that she loves and cares for people. There are. I could name 100 people that are mentors for me that are. And I would say 75% of them are women, because I realized when I was in my 20s that I actually could not name women role models, and it disturbed me. And when I would ask other women, who are your role models, they would say their mothers, but they really couldn't think of people in the general population. And I saw that as really a dark spot in our, that the patriarchy had made us feel that they were so much more valuable that we couldn't even hold up. Who are Jen is one of my mentors and one of the people that I esteem the most, although she's very modest about it. I could name people in the political body right now, but I won't. But I just think we're in a space where we are looking for partners who will persist with us shoulder to shoulder. And some of those are younger women who are so excited to do their share now. And I spend a lot of my time both mentoring women of color in fundraising and working with younger women worldwide in helping them think about their, how then they will express their love and their care for society, where they should work, how they should work, what they do when they face difficulty. And I try to be available 10 hours a week to such women and girls, and that's part of my giving back.
Thank you, Tracy. Are you reading a book?
Oh, yes. I'm actually reading a book with my partner on forgiveness. It's actually called Forgiveness. It's a series of exercises. And so it's, how do we actually really forgive ourselves and each other? and the patriarchy, and instead, look to love and not get too stuck on our differences. And it's a very powerful book, that has many, many people contributing. And I'm usually reading 2 or 3 things at once. So we'll come back after people will share what she's reading as well, which I'm sure is a little more academic. But in that particular case, I'm trying to learn to. I've gotten very interested in nonviolent communication and what it means to be doing empathetic communication. Something that we kind of go from problem to solution instead of feelings, needs, and inquiry. And I'm trying to relearn how to stay in needs and how to also be a person who inquiry of feeling. What does it mean to feel, and to hear the feeling of other people and feel the feeling of other people, to care at a deeper level.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you know the author or the editor of the book? Can you remember the title?
Yeah, the forgiveness.
Yes.
Or the other.
The forgiveness.
I'll write it in the chat if that's all right. If that's okay.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Pilwha, would you like to respond to that? Do you have any mentors, role models
Yes.
that you'd like to?
I mean, like Tracy, I can name about 75 people. But I would certainly name Jen in my mentor and my
Thank you.
a great teacher. It's a very, very fundamental level that actually when I started as a women's studies professor, I never expected that I would be recognized, or women's studies would be recognized, because everybody was kind of questioning whether can that be an academic subject. Maybe activism or women's movement is recognizable and important, but about academic field, not so sure. That was very much of a universal reaction. So I thought, the patriarchal influence was thousands and thousands of years old. So how can people immediately recognize this great, ambitious discipline challenging patriarchy? So I never had any expectations of being recognized or valued. But then, to my very much of a surprise, within 20 years, people were looking at us, feminist scholars, and it was not general, but because it was a women's university, which is very particular, that the people who are thinking within the university were saying, wow, that it would be you who would provide alternatives. And so I was so taken. And at that time, I met Jen, and that was when I really got into the gift economy and the matriarchal societies. And a very new way of looking at things, like others' spirituality and so on. So certainly Jen has provided a basis of looking for sort of more fundamental or radical future. So thank you, Jen, for that.
Thank you, Pilwha and Tracy. Thank you both. What a wonderful thing you say. Yeah, thank you.
What about you, Jen? Do you have any role models that you would like to offer to us? Inspiration?
Well, I think we need a very radical change. And so I was thinking about that just now, if you asked me what I would say. And what I would say is Marx, is Karl Marx. I have had many other role models, but that is right now, I'm really on the cusp, on the turning point of saying we really have to have a very radical, different approach, because we're at such a terrible time in history, such a crucial moment. So we have to go back to the original women's values that we learn as children from our mothers. And that is where the gift economy arises. Somebody has to take care of us, whether it's our birth mother or somebody else, even men. But we have to have our needs satisfied when we're babies, or we don't survive. And that's where our operating system is laid down. It's giving and receiving. And that's what we have to get back to, the giving and receiving, and the emotions that are positive that go along with that, to heal our society, instead of having this exchange and the neoliberal values that go along with it. So we have to get into the values where satisfying other people's needs, not just our own, other people's needs, is important, and we give value to them and to doing that. So that's why I want to, that's why I say really that Marx is my mentor, because he explained exchange. I'm trying to go before that and explain gift giving to make the changes we need to make. We have to change the way we've been acting as a society, and now a worldwide capitalist patriarchal society that's ruining everything. So yeah.
Thanks, Jen. Absolutely. Absolutely. We need radical change. So I'm glad to be in the salon with very radical women saying very radical things, like tearing down the system and breaking it apart. And oh my goodness, actually even listening beyond the differences. So Judith, do you have a question for us here?
I can't resist starting with the news this week. In our conference last November, Vandana Shiva was rather scathing about what she called Bill Gates's pretense of giving. And I wonder if you have any influence on Melinda, and whether you think that this divorce is going to have a positive effect on that foundation.
I have a little information. If anyone else does, I welcome their participation. But so the foundation is set up, and so that it is not divided. She will remain on the board. I don't know for how long, and how they will. They may make decisions in a slightly different way. She may say, "I'd like to focus on these issues." But it's too soon to tell. And I would say that, there's a prenuptial agreement that actually controls the foundation and its assets, and how, of course, it will be divided. But she will, as has Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, who I mentioned earlier, who has done an extraordinary job with the billions of dollars, some of the billions of dollars that she's gotten. She's the 14th wealthiest person in the world. And I think Melinda will be in the first 5 or 6 when the assets are divided. I'm not sure how things will go, but it remains to be seen who she will choose as her advisors and how she will give. I'm hoping very much that there is a a radical transformation in her own personal giving. She tends to be quite academic in how she gives, and she does not have the same community-based exposure and experience, but there will be many people who come to her saying, here's what we'd like to offer you. And I think that's, it's too soon to tell. I would not expect the Gates Foundation itself to make very many changes, but she will have enough wealth to do many things, including continue to push the Gates Foundation. But divorce is divorce, and it's very complex, as we all know. And too soon to know, but I'm hoping that that she will have influence over her three sons over time, who may also, and their family, who may be involved in the Gates Foundation long term. And there's many ways to through investment and other ways that she could play an active role. So we, I'm sure the Women Donors Network and Women Moving Millions and other peers who are doing social justice and more community-based philanthropy will and have outreach to her. I don't have a direct connection, but I do know at least that much.
Thanks, Tracy. Either one of you two have any other insights or comments? Jen or Pilwha?
Well, I am going back to my problems. I wonder quite often whether I am suitable for this job as an academic and thinking radical thoughts instead of going out and soliciting grants from people. So this is one of the things I've been thinking. If you have any idea about what kind of activities chairperson of a funding organization should have, that would be very welcome.
Thank you, Pilwha. I think you're doing just fine doing what you're doing and helping to transform philanthropy and the focus of value from money to actually people, and that money is to be used as every other gift, not more valued, but equal value, so that everyone's gifts can flow. So thank you so much for all the work that you do. And
I love
I'm sure
that caring capacity. We're really here to increase our caring capacity for others, and our resourcefulness, and bringing out, how do you see yourself as resourceful? You may not think of yourself as having money, or some of you do. And I think that analysis, becomes something that really helps to lift people's sense that they have something to offer, that each of us has something to offer that is like the animal kingdom is given by some source, the way that it survives. And there's just many, many ways that women and all people are very resourceful. And that's a beautiful thing. I want to really thank Mary Claire also for mentioning the Decolonizing Wealth book, which I'm in a book group actually that's reading Decolonizing Wealth, Indigenous Wisdom to Heal Divides and Restore Balance. It's a brilliant, brilliant book and analysis. So it's in the chat, and I am so pleased that you brought it out. I'm in process of reading it, so I'm not as far along to say it's a completed, but I'm very moved by it. And I think it's one of the most important books that I've seen that allows us to remember the roots of colonization and how stuck we are in these old methods and old forms that are destroying the planet, so let alone our heartfelt and spiritual ways of being with each other. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Are we ready for another question? Liliana, are you ready?
Yes, I have a question for Pilwha. You said that there is a backlash against women and young girls in your country. Do you think it has to do with the new wealth of your country, or does it have anything to do with it at all? Or what is the reason for it?
Yeah, I think there are many reasons, I guess. that in the last several decades, the pressure of competition has become so strong, and with kind of success of women's movement, girls are high achievers, and they outdo boys of the same age group. And so that young generation of in their 20s or 30s, or 20s, have a memory that women or girls always outdo them. They're much smarter and high achievers and so on. So they feel that their share is threatened by these girls. But then because of this sense, make them more aggressive and kind of become anti-feminist. They want to attack any kind of feminist assertion or policy, or move to improve the conditions, because in all that young girls are not all of what women feel, and women as carers have still a very difficult time, because they are the second class workers in the labor market, and their caring work is not really recognized, etc. So I would say that this competitive ideas are one of the main reasons of backlash and anti-feminist ideas held by young men.
Thank you, Pilwha.
Thank you.
I want to raise one additional thing, which is, China Galland is, another of my mentors. And one of the things that she's been doing is looking also at the Black Madonna worldwide and the matriarchal cultures, sparked by the Black Madonnas, and how many people go on pilgrimage to gain their wisdom. And she's had a series on the shift in the last few weeks, which the Shift Network, I encourage you all to see as she studied these different goddesses. And one of the things that China has also done in her personal life, which has just been so moving to me, is that she's from Texas, and she realized that down the street that there was an African cemetery, and that it was owned by the land that the cemetery was on was adjacent to a corporation that was locking African Americans out from visiting rites to their ancestors' graves. And she began to organize 10 or 15 years ago, wrote a book about it called Love Cemetery, and is now making a movie about it, about really what it means to work shoulder to shoulder with people who are under attack and where an injustice is really, just unacceptably happening, and to be there with authentic love and care, and to not leave that circle, and to in fact grow the circle of caring. And I think that is the work. That to me seems, that we must show up for each other across cultures and across the globe, and in every way we can, and really we have more. There's different ways of doing it now because of Zoom, and also spiritually transmitting our love and our care, and continuing some of the practices of the goddess, the goddess work that we know of, or the spiritual traditions that we know of, because healing is happening at many different levels. And so I just offer those as examples of people who really have shown us, and who show us that this is not about being angry. This is about doing the right thing. And it's also about being loving and not letting people stand alone when they deserve to have our support in every way.
Thank you, Tracy. How about we move to the next question? Now, two things that are arising. It's China Galland, who wrote the book on the Black Madonnas and the story about the Love Cemetery that's soon to be a movie. And also Tracy has put into the chat the name of the book for those of you who were interested. It's called Beyond Forgiveness, Reflections on Atonement. It's a collection of essays. So Judith, do you have a question?
Shanna asked if you could talk more about legacy education. And I would add, if somebody has money to donate with all of the funds that both of you have talked about, where should one start?
Julie, do you want to go? Would you like to go, or would you like me to start, or what would you like to do?
Why don't you go first, Tracy?
So I got very interested in legacy giving. I mean, what I realized is that there's lifetime giving, and that might be in different forms: time, talent, treasure, creativity, volunteering, encouragement, resourcefulness, many, many different ways that I could give service. And that anyone can, that it's not just about having money, but there's sort of, having a giving plan and thinking also how then, if I have any money and I want to give some and redistribute some, and taxation is not, well, is not fair in my country. If you look at the happiness index reports, you see that the countries that are actually the happiest are those where there's quite high taxation, and that money is redistributed fairly and safety nets really exist and thrive. And we know this in the Scandinavian countries and other places, But what's true is lifetime giving is people generally giving out of income, not usually giving out of assets. And I got very interested in going, why am I only giving out of my income? And so legacy giving is saying, okay, there's what I'm going to give every year. There's what I might give in multi-year gifts. And there's actually also thinking about, what if I'm hit by a bus in July and I die? Am I ready? If I have children or don't have children, how much should they get? And I began to realize as I met with donors that an awful lot of people were giving in the US donations to universities that, with all due respect to you all who are academic, who they were progressive donors, many of them, or they were people who really cared about social justice. They might be giving to 15 projects that were related to social justice or women's issues. But when it came to them dying, they were leaving their estate to their church, synagogue, or mosque, or to their university, quite traditional institutions and organizations, out of simplicity or because their lawyer said, just leave to one or two organizations. And I've spent 25 years actually going to over 600 people saying, no, please do not do that. Some of the largest wealth holders that I knew, and rethink what your legacy planning is. And here's ways to, to think about it, which is, what do you want to change or preserve during your lifetime and beyond? And that word beyond and how you do it means, that in the United States, at least, and many other countries, you leave a bequest, or you leave a will or an instruction if you have any assets when you die. And some of those assets are redistributed to your family members or friends. And some of those assets go to taxes, and some of those assets can go to contributions. And so to have a plan, I've written a book that includes information about this, Inspired Philanthropy, but it's just also part of the donor education that we want to do. Now, when I say to you all, I'm so excited if I'm hit by a bus in July, or as the expression goes, because I have been able, I took out an insurance policy. I made a commitment to give $1 million on death. I have, an asset that has a few $100,000 in a condo in where I live. And so that when I die, I will be able to give, to 4 organizations, quite large gifts, feminist organizations. And I'm so excited to know that my work will continue. So I will die at peace, feeling as though my work has been continued. And there are lots and lots of ways that some people can actually begin to give now, charitable lead trusts or different vehicles. And I've gotten quite interested in how we can continue to move money. And it's a whole area that is called legacy planning. in the United States, but I'm happy to give anyone some resources about it if it's useful. And it, you know, when I say to you, I'm so happy to feel as though my work will continue and that my at a very high rate. In the last years, I've been giving about 10% of my income away, up to 40% of my income. The average American gives about 2% of their income. So for the majority of my life, I've given about 40% of my income away every year that I've earned, as well as my inheritance over that 10-year period. But what's true is upon death, again, if we don't have children, or if we do have children, we can make a decision that we're going to leave them a little and not the whole thing. And it's it requires intentional planning, because if you die without having done this planning, it automatically sometimes goes to your husband or spouse or a sister or brother who may not have the values that you do at all. And so I just encourage people to, you know, put some time into legacy planning. Very few of the women's foundations have in any way addressed this legacy planning piece. And it's actually building a wonderful way to build our future, and to know that, gee, there'll be $6 million or $20 million of gifts that come in the next 10 or 20 years. And it gives us a sense of hope that possibilities, you know, ahead, especially if you have a donor who says, you know, I really want my money to go to Indigenous people, you know, Indigenous women, and the work that they do. I really want my money to go to women who live in rural communities, women and girls. If there's real intention behind it, you know, whatever that designation is, that is your right. But it's also, you know, it's also great to say, I trust the board and the staff of these organizations, and I want very much to just give an outright gift and let the current board and staff make a decision on what is right for the times. That's really making a general fund, and that is the basis of trust-based philanthropy. It sort of says, I trust you to be closer to the world than I am right now, or the community. So if I started, I would give my local women's foundation or women's giving circle a donation. I would make a donation to the Ms. Foundation or a national foundation of your choosing, depending on where you live, and of course, and then I would give the Global Fund for Women or Urgent Action, or certainly Prospera, a grant to say, let's support global women's giving. If you've been to some countries or you have a relationship and you know that, you know, it's remarkable for the Korean Women's Foundation to be raising $2 million a year. I mean, it's a lot of money and a lot of hard work to raise that money. And so I just want to really acknowledge that fundraising can be fun, but it's mostly quite tedious and strenuous. And we need to open up our generosity and accelerate the possibilities by inviting women donors to actually not hold back and be so tough at giving, but in fact to understand when they move their money, their lifetime giving and their giving at death forward, that it creates a flow that attracts, you know, that actually is a cascade of love and joy and care, and allows us to feel so hopeful about the possibilities of the future.
Thanks, Tracy. I think with the time that we have left, which is only about 8 minutes, I think Jen would like to ask a question, and then we have time for some closing. So just be aware of the time.
Yeah,
Jen?
my worry is that the women funders and the women's foundations could be taken over into the kind of funding that the US does of countries in the global South, where they expect something back politically from them or economically. And this has happened. This is a really terrible pattern that our government has set up, but also corporations and I think probably individuals do it. So how do we avoid that kind of thing as women of goodwill who would never want to fall into that trap?
Okay, that's a big question. Pilwha, you're at the center of your foundation right now. Would you like to respond perhaps to that? And then we'll go to Tracy.
From the very beginning, Korea Foundation for Women decided not to be involved in political side. So, that apolitical, I mean, not taking side to any particular party is one of the principles. Another one is not to receive or apply for funding from a government fund, so that the foundation does not compete with other women's organizations. And the third principle is that we are not actually operate direct projects, because if we do, we will also have the effect of competing with other organizations. And in doing these three promises, I think we keep ourselves from being affected by any political influences or the business, influences. But that really gives us restrictions in terms of fundraising too. It's a weakness.
Thank you, Pilwha.
Yeah.
Yes, are you complete, or do you have more?
Oh, no, I'm talking only of the national, local level, not international level that Jen mentioned.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. How about you, Tracy?
I think the way governments have given in tradition, and Jen, I share your concern very, very deeply, not your just concern, your anger and upset about this, because it's been so manipulative and so, continued colonial practices. And if we look at the World Bank and the institutions that have really destroyed in many ways the alliances and the debt and the lack of forgiveness and all the terrible things that have been done with very little apology, we have every reason to be skeptical of these major institutions. They are changing because there are younger people who have different politics that are coming in, but they're still institutions that have their own mandates and their own backbone that is too closely allied with corporations and too closely allied with traditional investors, and who expect the exchange economy in return. So I think that our hope is really in building the alternative funding structures, and also to have people who are advocates, who understand policymaking, who are certainly are the people who actually are speaking up in every way and being matter of fact. And I'll give it'll take 2 minutes, but I'll just at least say this. There is a new confidence that is happened because of Black Lives Matter that basically says, really it is unacceptable to be 40% of Americans who are people of color, and for foundations and others to be giving only less than 8%. And you've done this for over 400 years. You've oppressed us. And this is not a time for guilt. This is time for right action. And so we are seeing some people who say, it's just matter of fact, you should be giving at least 10% of your endowments without question, without tying it up, without taking too long to create a community-based group of people who are African-American, brown and Black, who know what communities need and trust them enough to simply give your 10% of your endowments or more away, or another model. And I'm seeing that there is a new, what I would say, confidence that says we must do the right thing. And I don't want to be overly idealistic, but I do want to say I believe that if we echo and we speak up and we do not hold back from reminding people that there is a better way, that we stand to see some wonderful new transformation that is based on the maternal and the gift economy. And it is up to each of us to be the echo and the cheerleaders for that better way.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you very much to everyone for your attention and your time. I just want to do a little bit of administration here to remind you and apologize if we did not get to your question. We will make sure that your questions are sent to the speakers and to Jen. We also send along email addresses so that they can respond to you directly. And I want to invite you, if you have any questions for us or for our speakers, while you're viewing, I think Diane put in where you could view all of the salons. If questions arise, you can always send them to us at maternalgifteconomy@gmail.com. And we will make sure that those questions get sent to the right person and that you do get a response. Thank you so much, Pilwha, for staying up. I know it's early morning for you. What time is it right now?
3 o'clock.
Okay. And Tracy, Gary, thank you so much for joining us, and Jen too in Italy. It's always very thrilling and exciting. I know there's plenty of questions and a need to network where we can put resources and education to where the needs are, and where we can get support for the funders and to get the small funds growing, that each of us, how large or small, that we continue to give and gift specifically and most importantly to women's issues, so that the maternal gift economy and women's funds continue to thrive and flourish. I want to thank also Diane and Ellen Escoco, who are our tech support, Liliana and Judith, and all of you for your attention and your very engaging questions. We'd love to invite you again to come on May 22nd for our 13th Salon with Darsha Navaris and Mary Tarsha. Jen, could you just say a little bit about what they might be talking about?
Well, Darsha has really opened up the field of mothering in community, as happened in prehistory throughout the 99% of our genus history. When we have been becoming human in a better way than we are now, because our mothering practices of women in nuclear families don't have community around them, and so they can't do everything with regards to children as they need to do, as children need. They don't have what Darsha calls the evolved nest, the nest of human beings around the children, and she believes that we need to restore that in order to create a right kind of moral and value development in all of the human beings in our society. So that's what she'll be talking about. And her companion will be talking about the neurological basis of young children and mothers. So that is going to be a very interesting event.
Thanks, Jen. Registration is already open for that salon. And I want to remind you that this salon will, the recording will be put up by Monday morning. Maybe we'll even see it on Sunday. So I want to thank everyone for your attention, and please take really good care of yourselves and enjoy tomorrow. For all of you who are birth mothers and all of us who are motherers, with all of the motherly values and efforts, caring, sharing, and love that we put in the world. Take very good care. Please, if you'd like to be notified, you can sign up for a mailing list that just is a notice list that you can do that at our website, the maternalgifteconomymovement.org. So until next time, take very good care and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye for now. Everybody,
Thank you all
yes.
so much.
I want to thank
Bye,
Diane,
everyone.
especially want to thank Diane for being our tech wizard and an amazing job. Thank you, Pilwha, for staying up with us all, and Jen always.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Ciao.